Are accelerators a scam or are they essential capital for startups? Find out next on This Has to Work. All right, Kelly. You got about half of the population in the startup world saying that accelerators are junk and they're a scam and it's just a way for some organization to book a bunch of fees. And then you got half of the startup world that look at it as a very legitimate way for them to truly accelerate their business at an early stage. So who's right?
Everyone. Everyone. If you go to Reddit, one of the most humbling things that I've done in a while, and maybe masochistic working with the Accelerator, is I went to Reddit and I was researching just in general something, and I stumbled upon a post in an article. The post was this long rant about how accelerators are a scam. So there is a startup Reddit, you can find it all in there, and Accelerator Reddit, you can find it all in there. And then there was another post that posted an article, and it said accelerators are worthless. And I read the article, and there were good points. Accelerators, there have been instances where founders have legitimately gotten scammed. That's why I'm personally against accelerators where you have to pay for participation. I think that's more of a consulting type of thing. I think if you walk away from an accelerator, first of all, if you got your check, it's not a scam, right? If you got the money in your account.
So step one, you got paid.
Step one, you got paid, right? Step two, the question I ask, is it a scam or did you overestimate the power of the accelerator? Is it a scam or do you just not have product market fit? Is it a scam or did you not do your due diligence in your research? All of those things matter, right? It's not just on the accelerator or the accelerator team to sell to you. You really do have to do a deep dive and properly evaluate the accelerator. And it's not gonna fix your business. You still are, the point is to de-risk you, but the failure rate is still high. And the benefit of accelerators is that they're early investors, right? You can get a check in really early stages when investors probably won't touch you. Most accelerators are still very much pre-seed, and we all know that that's a goalpost that just keeps moving. And so, you just really have to be honest with yourself and determine, are you and your team ready for an accelerator? And there's some backdoor conversations that will happen when you interview with the accelerator, and I'd love to have a conversation about that, like how founders can prepare for that and what they need to know, because some founders do come to the conversation at a supreme disadvantage. And it's little things like you come on the call and your co-founder isn't there. Well, my co-founder lives in a different time zone. Tough tit. Sync up, make it work. And that's one of those things. And that is such a red flag.
So let's tear into that portion quickly, because I agree with you, having been on a lot of these calls and these interviews, and we're trying to get them to ask us questions on, we're sitting on the accelerator side, they're sitting on the founder side, and we're asking them like, hey, what questions do you have? And we get the lamest questions that have clearly not been thought of prior to that. And it always shocks me. And I think that leads to a negative experience, because somehow in their brain, they have determined this is what this is going to look like. And right or wrong, they come into the accelerator. And if it doesn't meet those, it's almost negative, just like out of hand. So is that the root of why some founders come out of these programs and go, well, that was terrible, or I didn't have a good time, or whatever the case would be? Like, were their expectations just off from the beginning?
I think that's part of it. I think a lot of founders are operating under a scarcity mindset. That's just part of it. They have a lot of emotion around, look, things may crumble, and when emotion goes up, cognition and decision making go down. So that's number one. That's definitely a part of it. I think, too, we just have to come to terms with the fact that accelerators now, there's so many. There is a legitimate quality control issue, and they're merchandise. They're like products at the moment, right?
Yeah, speaking of that scarcity mindset, I just had an interview, or just sat in on an interview with a founder for an accelerator program. And they said, I'm really excited about being accepted into this program because this will fix a lot of the mistakes I've made in the past. And I was like, you didn't just say that out loud, did you? And then I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this is one of those
like getting married will fix our relationship.
Yeah, we're gonna have a baby, and like now we don't need to get divorced. It's like, yeah. So it was one of those where I literally, after the fact, said to the other people on the call, I was like, did he just say that out loud? Because that was exactly what I took from it, which is I'm in a really dark place and I'm really desperate.
Yeah.
And so this, handful of cash that this accelerator is potentially providing is going to be my lifeline. And so they're starting off on like the back foot.
Yeah. And I think those are the moments to leadership. If you are leading an accelerator, that you have to, we've met with founders where it was clear, like if this did not work out, it would be a detriment to their mental health. And that is a lot of responsibility. And sometimes you get to the point where, well, we can't, if we say no, then what's going to be the end result for this founder? Like, are they going to break down? But yeah, as a founder, you need to do your due diligence and you need to ask questions.
Yeah, I had one founder in that same series of interviews ask what I thought was a very good question, which was, what does the day-to-day look like? What will I be spending my time doing? Because I think you would agree with this. We tend to think of things like runway in kind of capital terms. I have this much money left. Well, the reality is all that really is time.
Right.
So stop thinking about it as money. Think about it as how much time does this give me? And if I'm wasting my time, then that's where you really should be understanding, what are you going to get out of this? And is this the best use of my time?
For sure. It's an opportunity cost.
Yeah.
If you're going to be an accelerator, there are going to be other things that you aren't doing. There are going to be other things that you simply can't do. Ideally, you will have time to work on your company. If you're doing it right, you won't even be in front of your computer. You'll be out making deals, having conversations, building relationships. But yeah, I think that's a perfect question. And when founders don't ask that question, first of all, it can be a little offensive because it's like, you're about to come here. You don't know what we do. We could be a scam. You should really ask that question. And then it's like, do you want someone in your portfolio or a team in your portfolio that, doesn't want to ask the hard questions to be able to make the best decisions for their company? So ask the questions. Like that's the entire point of the interview.
Just a quick time out to ask you if you'd please hit that subscribe button. 88% of people who watch our videos are not subscribed to our channel. So if you want the latest on startup news, technology, innovation, or even just business discussions, click that subscribe button. Promise to give you some good content. One long form video a week and several shorts along the way. Hit that subscribe button. Help us reach our goal of 5 new subscribers every single week. Thanks so much. It seems to me that accelerators have gone through some sort of evolution. And if I go far enough back, when I say far enough back, this is like startup timeline relative terms, which is way back 10 years ago. Accelerators really started as these quote unquote incubators. Yeah. The problem with an incubator was basically I'm going to carry your P&L for you for some period of time while you sit in this crappy, office in our existing office space and try to figure out something that's specific to a market or specific to an industry or even specific to our own business or in which you are housed. Yeah. But people realize pretty fast that the motivations stink on that, because if you're getting your P&L taken care of, how much risk are you going to take as a startup founder? You're pretty well kept, right? You're kind of a house cat at that point. Yeah. So then you start seeing the evolution going, we need a start, we need a middle, we need an end, right? We need to get them here, we need to work with them, and we need to get them out. So this idea of a 12-week accelerator program or 8-week accelerator program or whatever the case may be started to evolve. But I've heard you say in the past that, kind of traditional accelerator models have quote unquote had their moment. What do you mean by that?
I mean it in so many different ways. And this is a spicy take. I'm split on in-person versus hybrid. Obviously hybrid is more founder friendly. I think in industry specific categories, in-person does bode well for the trust building. But I do think they've had their moment as far as the traditional model. And I think it's because hardware is just very easy to create now. The cost of creating, I'm sorry, not hardware, software. It's just very easy to create now. All of the information at one point that was gate kept, you can Google, or you can ask ChatGPT, or if you're really good, you can use deep research if you're a hell of a prompter and do your customer, at least your top level customer discovery through that. And so, in my opinion, the next evolution of accelerators, and we're absolutely seeing this, isn't just about the model, right? Because you have the venture studio model, and then you have the traditional accelerator model, but it's about what are we doing? Like, what's the ultimate goal? And from my perspective, the next evolution is distribution. The accelerator, the investment accelerator, focusing on distribution. I think a lot of accelerators historically have over-indexed to fundraising. And, you know, I'm a big proponent of bootstrapping if you can. If you're in a highly regulated industry, that may not be possible. But I think the best value, particularly in this climate with investing, and it's going to be like this for a while, the best value that an accelerator can bring is to prepare you for customers and get you in front of customers, period. You do not get investment without cash flow, teaching you how to manage your money. But the lean model canvas, and now I am a fan of pre-accelerators. I think if you are in a secondary or tertiary market, you should focus first on pre-accelerators, creating that energy of ideation, building up the pool of individuals who actually have an appetite to do this and have had some sort of experience through a pre-accelerator to know what that feels like. But just the proliferation of a bunch of accelerators and nothing at the top of the funnel, it does not make sense.
Yeah, I'll take the grandpa viewpoint on this one, which is I can't stand virtual accelerators. I think it's a complete missed opportunity. I think it's a disservice to whoever is funding it. I think it's a disservice to the founders. I think it's a disservice to the community that surrounds it. You know, we can have a conversation about location-based, you know, or location-specific investing. I certainly have some strong feelings about that as well. But just the serendipity that founders get from each other by being in person. I'm sorry, I'm going to sound like a boomer here. I'm not a boomer, but I'll sound like one for a second, which is you're not getting that on Slack. You're not getting that on a Discord channel. You're not getting that on Zoom. That's bullshit. Get in front of other founders. Be honest, be open, be vulnerable. Talk about what's going well. Talk about what's not going well. Open yourself up from learning from each other. And I'm sorry, but that's just not happening with any kind of fidelity or with any kind of momentum across a Zoom meeting.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. Particularly with an investment accelerator, you're not wrong. I know there are pre-accelerators that may require in person, and if they have a hyper-local focus, that makes sense. But having people like relocate for a pre-accelerator, that's just a ridiculous ask. But no, I don't think you're wrong there. I think that is one of the points of failure for accelerators. It's very easy to build in a vacuum. When I was running a startup through a venture studio, I actually got some feedback on that because I have a tendency to, when I'm hyper focusing, to just go heads down and vanish, right? And when you're building, you simply can't do that, and it's hard to check out. And so having people around you to kind of gut check you and pull you out of the hole, to your point, it is valuable.
So the penultimate event for any accelerator usually is some sort of showcase or demo day or something like that. And again, back in the olden days of 10 years ago, that was really geared towards this idea that you were pitching investors that were in the room. Well, we all kind of quickly figured out, especially for those of us in kind of smaller emerging markets, there aren't any investors in the room, or there aren't any serious investors in the room. And if they are, they've already talked to you, they already know about you, because the managing director's probably already reached out and made a connection directly between a startup that's of interest and an investor that might have interest in them. So you have these demo days, and so now they've become more like showcase events. The question I always have is, what is the value in those demo days, those showcase, kind of events at the end of the accelerator?
Yeah, status quo, I think. I don't know if the demo days are good or bad. I think the question is, to your point, is it valuable and for whom, right? And if we can't definitively say that this is valuable, it gives outsized value to the founder, then the question is, then why the hell are we doing it? And I think you kind of saw that change. Demo days were meant to demo in front of an audience of investors. Well, now, do you know how many demo days? Right now, I have 6 demo days, virtual, 1 in person, on my calendar all across the country. I mean, so being able to even...
How many of those are you going to even attend? Let's be honest.
1, yeah. And that one is local. And so it's like it's just not possible. And I think it's good for a community aspect. I think it's important for founders to understand what it is, right? Like the odds of you presenting at a demo day, if you're not like at Y Combinator or something, and you actually get an investment from that, is slim. Also, that is usually a culmination in general. So if that's the first time you're getting in front of investors, then I would argue to say that the accelerator hasn't done its job.
Yeah. So coming back to this idea of in-person and where it's located and all of that, how important is the location of the accelerator to you as we move forward? Like, is that real? Does that matter the way that it seemed to matter, or certainly the way it was pitched to stakeholders in the past?
I think the location matters when it comes to a number of things. Having an accelerator is great. An accelerator can't fully be leveraged if the infrastructure around it, if the infrastructure within the ecosystem, either 1, doesn't have momentum, or 2, is underdeveloped. And I think that's something that all secondary, if you aren't a coastal city and you are partnering with accelerators, then you really need to ask yourself, because an accelerator isn't a silver bullet. Working for an accelerator, most of my colleagues were going to work and we're doing our jobs and we're fulfilling our end of the bargain, right? But if the community isn't right once these founders are released into it, then I don't care who you are. If you are not on the coast, then there's going to be friction. So it matters. And it also matters with recruitment if you are located where you're located. So we spend a lot of time when we're having conversations with founders explaining away the ills of our state. It is a reality. And there isn't one person who is running an accelerator in this state who has not had that experience. There was one company, I'll give you 2 examples. There was a company who was working on women's fertility. It was IVF. Really excited to talk to them. Then the IVF legislation came down, and she sent me a message that said, on second thought, we're going to rescind our application. Alabama seems like an inhospitable state for our company. And you can't argue with that, right? And so I think there's often a mismatch between what the ecosystem builders and investors are doing on the ground and what's happening up the chain when it comes to lawmakers and all these other things, right? And so there's these misaligned incentives that people on the ground are going to bump into when we're trying to recruit and invest and find the best of the best to either locally or to come here, right? So that's one thing. And then I think the second example was there was a company that was focused on LGBTQ mental health, and he was an immediate no. If you're still there, I'd love to talk. I mean, I saw your traction. You're looking great, homie.
There was also too just a perfect example of how an ecosystem didn't do its own customer discovery around the kind of innovation and startups we needed to lean into. 6, 7, 8 years ago, some big expensive report came out and said that we should be leaning into startups that are in healthcare, that are in banking, and advanced manufacturing.
Okay.
So the healthcare part I agree with. Slightly different, not healthcare, but maybe digital health. So things that are trying to like
bio,
right?
for sure.
But not necessarily healthcare as an industry. The problem with the other two is nobody bothered to ask, when was the last time you hired a startup as a vendor?
Don't get me started.
And the answer was never, right? And so let's just take advanced manufacturing. That was coming off in Alabama, it was coming off of the success we've had in attracting auto manufacturing. Well, the thing that people don't understand with auto manufacturing is that when a Mercedes-Benz comes in, they also bring their tier 1 and tier 2, sometimes even tier 3 vendors and suppliers with them.
Okay.
So, and they may be coming from Munich or Stuttgart or from Korea or from Japan, or you name foreign country that's not the United States of America. And there's not much room for them, right? And in banking, they are so scared of startups for their regulatory environment. Sometimes that's just an excuse, but that's the excuse they use, and they use it very regularly, that they won't hire them either. So it feels like we're a little bit guilty of that ourselves. The other part about location that I think that we get wrong as far as accelerators go is that relocation piece for the companies, for the founders that are coming to an accelerator that is in person, that is location based, because we have this image kind of seared in our minds that a startup founder is 22 years old or 24 years old. They're not married. They don't have kids. And the fact of the matter is that if we look at our demographics, that's just not the case. So what does it actually look like?
The average startup founder and the average successful startup founder as well is between 30 and 40 years old. So this caricature of a college student wearing a hoodie, right, that has no responsibilities, it's false. And we've had this conversation about location-based funds. I think it's not location-based funds. The follow-on funding being tied to location, I think is ridiculous. I think the only way that it makes sense is if that geography, that location can absolutely with certainty say that they have the infrastructure to support you once you decide to relocate here. Otherwise, you run a huge reputational risk. And it will, once founders start to no longer trust the process or trust your ecosystem, founders talk, right? And so once that trust is gone and once you don't deliver on those promises, it's going to create a problem.
So if you're sitting there and you're 35 years old or 36 years old, you might be married, you might even have kids at that point, and the idea of relocating is just not as attractive or even applicable for where you are in your professional and personal kind of life. And so you end up with this, unfortunately, this disconnect, because older founders tend to have more experience. Older founders have more of a professional network. Not always, but a lot of times. Those founders are easier to invest in because they are less risky. They have some background. They have some track record. They have some skills. They've developed a network. All of those things.
Some resilience accumulated over time.
So while you might be able to get a 24-year-old or a 23-year-old, not married, doesn't have kids, doesn't have a partner, whatever the case may be, to relocate, you're getting a young founder. You're getting a young professional, and they don't have the experience, just literally based on time on this earth, if nothing else, than some of these others. So you get this disconnect, and I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and that presents an opportunity cost for the accelerator too. To me, the answer is, okay, let's say the infrastructure doesn't exist, fine. That's when it's important that the fund has local LPs, right? So if this company hits, they may not relocate here and HQ here and create jobs, which is another conversation, because as a startup, having a massive payroll is just not the point. But if you do well, then some of that wealth that's generated comes back into the location. And so I think that's the trade-off that that cities and states that aren't on the coast need to really think through before they make that ask to founders, and then you run into an equity issue. Everyone just can't pick up and leave. And your ability to be able to do that does not mean that you are the better founder. It just means that you may have less responsibility. You may have more time affluence. You may have more.
All right, so let's take this segment of the podcast or the vlog or whatever the hell this is called, and we'll call it School the Gen Xer. So I obviously just a second ago was very vocal about how I feel about location and how important it is and what it plays. But it is a limiting factor. It is a limiting factor from a recruitment standpoint. It's a limiting factor for success for some folks. So walk me through, what are the alternatives? Like how do we think differently about the importance or the place that location should play in all of this?
Yeah, I think I really like hybrid models when it comes to that. So one of my colleagues, Infiniso, he manages an accelerator, one of our accelerators in Generator. And they have a hybrid model. So there's a swat of time where you're in person and you're making those connections, because then what happens is eventually there's just a natural lull, like towards the end of the accelerator. And so one way is to book in the accelerator in person on the front end and then in person on the back end. And then you have this middle to be heads down and work. Now, if that model is a thing, then the accelerator team, the managing director, the investors, they really have to be dialed in. And those companies have to be the center of the universe for a particular amount of time so that no one falls through the cracks. So there does need to be some thought around accountability measures and really on the onset with recruitment, like how plugged in will this founder be? But I think that's a really good way to kind of balance the two.
So accelerators are not a scam. There are certainly some things that an accelerator has to do and founders have to do to make sure that it's a good fit for them and the accelerator with that founder. Obviously, that's a two-way street. But what makes a quality accelerator team? So the function within the accelerator, the people that are actually delivering the programming, delivering the experience, what makes a quality team in that environment?
You get mixed reviews on this. Some would say it's folks who have a financial or venture capital background. Some will say it's the operators. I think it's an elegant mix of the two. For me, myself, like when it comes to the venture side, I know enough to be dangerous, right? I know the definitions. I know I can look at a cap table, make my assessments. I know enough to be dangerous. There are people who are way smarter than me on my team who could do that. I always put stuff in front of you. I'm the operator. I can look at your product and your engagement and tell you how to fix your churn. Like I can get deep into the nitty gritty with you. I'm the product person, the GTM. Let's talk about your positioning, like all of those little components that lead up to it. And so it can ebb and flow, which is which. But I think if you boil it down, and I'm just going to speak from the role of a managing director, I don't think you had to have ran or started a startup. In my assessment, having ran a startup is most helpful in one area. It is helpful to be a managing director who has ran a startup because you have a degree of empathy of what this actually feels like. And we really do underestimate the pressure, the decisions, and all of the things that founders have to make. It is very easy to sit at our computers, our email, our Slack, and give a founder directives, right? Those who can't do, invest. That is what they say. It is very easy to do that. But once you've actually had that experience, a light bulb goes off and you really get it. And it's just, you just can't explain it. So that's number one. So I don't think you need to have had that experience, but the reason that experience is valuable is because of the empathy that it creates. The second, I think what is valuable is, have you ran something small? Have you been the first employee on a really small team? Have you worked on a really small team? I really think personally, working in nonprofits and being in positions where I had to raise my salary, working in a small nonprofit is literally the exact same. The only difference is like the tax code.
Yeah, I agree.
It's literally the exact same. So if you have worked in a small nonprofit, do not cut yourself out. You're actually quite primed for this. So I think it's being able to manage other people's money, a grant, having a degree of founder empathy, if you've done consulting, have you started something?
Yeah.
Right? No matter how small.
One other thing I have found, and I've watched you and Amanda do this, I've watched Chris Udall up in Huntsville do this with a different program, just to actually name names here. But you guys do something that I think you probably don't identify this way, so I'm going to do it for you, which is energizing accountability. So there's the there's the kind of accountability where it's, did you do this? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And then you get either the excited proclamation that, yes, I did this and I achieved this, or you get that like kind of shrinking self-guilt, kind of, like the dog who knows they just got caught rooting through the trash, right?
Yeah.
It's like, but you guys do something a little bit differently, which is let's talk about your accountability, but let's remind you why we're doing this in the first place.
Right.
So this matters because of this. And when you do this, then you can do these other things. And so it's this idea of like, no, this isn't like, hey, it's time to go to the principal's office and figure out if I've been doing my assignments. It's, I'm coming back and going, okay, that's right. I remember now. Yes, I didn't get that done. I deprioritized that. That was probably a mistake. I won't do that again. Now I understand how all these things go together. And that feels more energizing than it feels just, hey, I'm slapping you on the back of the knuckles because you didn't do what you were supposed to do.
Making people feel good about the work that you're doing for them and constantly reminding people of the why. And there's this concept of you have to tell the drummer what the words of the song are about, right? So if you have a drummer, you don't just say, play this. You have to tell the drummer what the words of the song are about. So if people are constantly being reconnected to why the hell are we here, then you get a whole different level of energy. Also, putting the accountability back into the founder's hands. So what that looks like for us programmatically, we have this rule, and I got it from Ethan Summers, no agenda, no attender, right? We're here for you, but also you're the center of the universe for 12 weeks. You must be respectful of everyone's time. You need to come to the meeting knowing what the hell you want to talk about. If there's no agenda, we ain't attending.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the big opportunities within Accelerators is this alignment between kind of the overall regional strategy and corporate involvement within that region. And we know that that's hugely important and can affect all of these things that we're talking about, whether it's recruitment, because you have a reputation for how the region and how that, those local corporate customers or mentors or partnerships play into that precedes the accelerator if it's doing a good job. And I think it's incredibly important when that's also how you're differentiating your accelerator for these founders. So when you think about that, kind of part of accelerators and accelerator building, how do you see Middle America and the Deep South specifically competing to have these successful accelerator programs and to create successful outcomes for founders?
Yeah, I don't want not to undermine initiatives that are happening around the country to increase more venture capital. I think if we're talking about quick wins, low-hanging fruit, having the constant single pursuit of attracting venture isn't the way. I think where we win, and I think obviously doing both, but I think the 80-20, like leaning into the distribution is where cities and states in the middle of America are going to win, right? If you can say, when you come here, you can leave with a customer, that is huge. A founder that doesn't take that over some money, that is crazy work. That is crazy work.
Yeah.
I think where we'll win is by really trying to deeply understand what the industry needs, and the institutions that are in our ecosystem are proxies for understanding the market at large, right? What one large enterprise, what one bank wants is probably what all the other bank wants. So if you can really understand, you just know the strategic priorities of different industry makers who are in your location, that is a win in and of itself. Even if you can't promise a customer, you can give them insights that can't be Googled, right?
Yeah, I would add one caveat to that, which is I think one of the mistakes we make is we go and we have conversations with big companies, potential customers for these startups, and we ask them what kind of solutions they need. And one of two things happens. One is they don't know.
Right.
Because they don't spend any time thinking about this. It's not like they wouldn't figure it out, but it might be the first time they've ever contemplated the question, because that's just not how procurement and vendor selection and basically their balance sheet works. It's just not. So you may just get kind of blank stares, or you get kind of the placated, oh yes, we would definitely be interested in this, when really what we should be asking is, would you buy this from a startup at an early stage, who's coming from somewhere else? Would you do that? And being specific about that. And then hopefully they're honest with you and say, well, that's different, right? Maybe not. Or, maybe we let them do a free pilot, or we give them some access to some anonymized data, or whatever the case may be. But no, we're probably not really customers on that. And so it really gets to the point of have we really mapped the need in a way that ends up in some sort of startup success in a vendor relationship or whatever? What do you think the role that corporations have from kind of a responsibility to the startup ecosystem? Yeah. Maybe even more specifically to accelerators. What is their responsibility to that? Do they have any at all?
You need to do two things. You either need to if you have a corporate fund, then the accelerator is a pipeline, is a deal source for you. So that's one. Or you need to allocate a portion of your budget to external innovation. Those are the only two options.
Yeah. I would also add too, I would add a third option, which is you don't want to do business with startups. You don't want to invest in startups. That's fine. Don't pretend otherwise.
I would say that too. Just say so. And that's fine. Like, recuse yourself from the process. Or if a corporation isn't being transparent about that, if you have no interest in it, then quite frankly, it's dead weight to the ecosystem, right? And I don't think we should shame corporations who who verbally want to recuse themselves from that type of participation in the ecosystem. But I do think a fair ask is to just say, hey, this isn't our thing. It's too risky for us. This is something that we can't get shareholders on board for. We don't have a lot of it. We don't have just the team capacity or bandwidth to shepherd them through our organization. Just say so.
Yeah. The idea is the founders don't want to go to 4 lunches with you. They don't enjoy it as much as you think. Just tell them no. It's not in our plan. It's not something we want to do. Be quick with that no. You're doing them a massive favor.
Truth is kindness.
Yeah, and get over that kind of the uncomfortableness. Or don't take the first lunch, but certainly don't string it out for months on end. So thinking about the ecosystem builders' challenges around this space, how do accelerator programs play a role for ecosystem builders, people who are trying to move an ecosystem that's emerging or small forward?
It is a way to add a degree of the scaffolding and just early capital on fair terms. I think that is the biggest win. You can start attracting talent or seeding the companies that are in your accelerator through accelerators led by folks who have industry expertise, who have been there, done that, who are great operators. And then the founder gets access to capital that they probably wouldn't get otherwise if there isn't just a bevy of investors that are already in the community who are ready to do true pre-seed or seed investment.
So for you, as you look at how we would potentially evolve accelerators to be more successful, and thinking of next steps around the evolution of those accelerators, I will go back to something you said early on, which is, if the focus of the accelerator program is to find you your next investor, that's probably the false signal, or that's probably the false goal in all of this. Rather, you believe they should be focusing on customer acquisition or certainly customer attraction. So that's certainly one place that they can start. But what are the other steps that you think accelerator programs should make to be even more successful as we move forward?
Yeah, I think too. One is hinge the program on a key industry partner. I think there's certainly a place for industry agnostic programs, for sure, particularly with the rise of AI, and it's just so applicable in different spaces, e-commerce, all of those things. And for all intents and purposes, if you're smart about it, you're doing all the things, if it's a good team, getting to market, I won't say you'll be successful, but getting to market and getting access to your customers will be difficult, but not as difficult if, say, you're in a highly regulated industry like in energy, healthcare, agriculture, something like that. In the event that it is a highly regulated legacy industry, attaching that accelerator to an industry partner, if you don't do that, I don't know how the founders win. I don't know how anyone at the table gets value. So I think that's number one. And I will say that is happening a lot more. And not just from the large, big names, but just in general, just with states who are creating their own accelerators, or that's what's happening. We've had that wake-up call. I think the second is I would love to see more accelerators or venture studio models within colleges and universities. There's just so much locked up talent and IP in college and universities. I think the most exciting experience I've had lately has been at the University of Alabama, working with the Big Ideas Challenge. And these are graduate students or upper class undergrad mad. These are the idea, the research, how methodical they are. Like, these are really talented students. I'm working with one group on a solution. The company is Cognify, and they're building an AI tutoring software platform. And at first I was like, tutoring? I mean, there's so many, there are resources for tutoring. And I went through their customer discovery research, and it is just very broken on college campuses. And the pace of execution, I'm working with 3 young ladies, they're engineering students, and they are just cutting it up. And so, yeah, the venture studio model sitting within universities, I think could be a real win too.
So there you have it. Not all accelerators are scams. Not all accelerators are great. Make sure that you're going into each program eyes wide open. Make sure it makes sense for you as a founder. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.